Hello curious. Vampires. Condemned beings who feed on human blood. They have been stirring the human imagination for years and are probably the most famous monsters in history. Most of us associate them with a handful of characters, most commonly the legendary Count Dracula or Edward Cullen from Twilight. But have you ever heard about the most famous female vampire? And no, here we do not mean Bella Swan. This woman really existed and lived in the 19th century in the United States. Who was she and how did she become known as the first female vampire in the world? Why is it said that her story inspired Bram Stoker when he wrote his famous novel? How did the book about Dracula ignite a real fascination with vampires in the world, which also led to the Twilight Saga? Stay with us until the very end to find out the answers to all these questions and more, but before we continue, don't forget to hit the bell and subscription button so you don't miss any of our videos. What do we know about vampires? Well, mainly is that they are blood-sucking creatures with sharp fangs. They haunt at night because the sunlight weakens them. Some of them can turn into animals mainly depicted as bats or wolves. They do not see their reflection in the mirror and they do not cast a shadow. Well, that is how they have stuck in our imagination for years and how they have been portrayed in the pages of novels and in films. That description is also exactly the creature that was the protagonist of Dracula, a book which was written in 1897 by the Irish author Bram Stoker. It was he who created the legend of the Count, a vampire who became an icon of world of pop culture. It is also to him that we owe the first ever vampire on screen and the promotion of the horror film genre. Yes, you heard that right. One of the first horror films in the world was made in 1922 and was titled Nosferatu, and it was based on the Dracula novel. Some even consider it to be one of the most outstanding works of cinema. It is interesting that the director of this production did not even have copyrights to the characters of Dracula, so, for the purpose of the film, he cheated a little and changed some of the themes in the movie and the names of characters. Although it can be said that he technically stole Stoker's idea, the fact is that Nosferatu inspired other filmmakers. And so, less than 9 years later, the first Dracula film graced cinema screens. The main role was played by Hungarian actor Bela Lugosi, who created one of the most iconic interpretations of this character. 1958 brought the horror of Dracula with one of the most unforgettable of the titular character, this time portrayed by the late Sir Christopher Lee. Although we cannot forget the incredible performance as the character by Gary Oldman in Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 film. And it is that adaptation of the Count's story created by this director that is still considered the most popular one. Since then, the themes and topics of vampires have returned to the screen many more times, although their image began to evolve from a heartless monster to a seductive gentleman and a teen idol. For example, in modern times, the vampire is often associated with Edward from the Twilight Saga. When the first part of the Twilight series appeared in cinemas more than a decade ago, it immediately won the hearts of the audience. The love story of a teenager and a vampire turned out to be a spectacular hit, earning almost $400 million worldwide, multiplying the initial budget almost 10 times. It was the beginning of Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson's worldwide careers. Anyway, as soon as it was announced who would play the lead roles in the movie, the interest in the news was so great that the servers on MTV.com, which had the first cast photos, had crashed due to the number of people trying to access it. What's more, as the first installment of the saga was released in cinemas, the cast became so popular on the biggest film website, IMDb, they had overtaken such stars like Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Angelina Jolie. The following parts of the Twilight Saga, New Moon, Eclipse, and Breaking Dawn were another success story. It is worth mentioning here that the whole series of films achieved an incredible cash score of over $3.3 billion. However, these hits would not have been made had it not been for Stephanie Meyer's books. The author who wrote the stories about Bella Swan and Edward Cullen, which have become global bestsellers, has made a name for herself on the same scale as J.K. Rowling, the creator of Harry Potter, about who we also have a video. The book saga has sold over 50 million copies worldwide. And although it has been 15 years since the Twilight book was released, Stephanie Meyer brought joy to the fans when she decided to return to this series with a new novel titled Midnight Sun. In it, the same love story is told from Edward Cullen's point of view. In the first week after its premiere, the book sold 1 million copies in the United States alone. According to the latest reports, the author plans to write 2 more parts of the saga in the future. Are you fans of her writing curious? Did you enjoy the new novel? Without a doubt, it is thanks to the saga that vampires are still in the top themes and arouse great interest. And whether it's due to horror films or books, there is no shortage of people who believe that vampires really exist. According to statistics, in America alone, 30% of the population is convinced that these creatures are real. Many people also find a grain of truth or authenticity in the the vampire stories that have inspired their creation. It is therefore essential that we return to Bram Stoker's most famous novel. After all, it was he who allegedly relied on the figure of Vlad the Impaler, who ruled in Wallachia, which is modern-day Romania, in the 15th century, and it was this man who had inspired the author to write Dracula more than a century ago. However, there could have been many more inspirations when it came to creating the book. One of them is the case of a woman named Mercy Brown, who lived in America in the 19th century. She is said to have been the base of Lucy Westenra, a character who became a victim of Dracula and got turned into a vampire herself. Mercy's unbelievable story was also an inspiration to other artists. The book, The Shunned House by H.P. Lovecraft himself, one of the most famous horror and fantasy authors, or Sarah L. Thompson, when she wrote Mercy, the Last New England Vampire, referred to it. This woman's story was also the theme for the 2015 movie Almost Mercy. So where did Mercy Brown's fame come from? Get comfortable because we're about to explain it all to you. To do this, we must go back to 1892. At that time, tuberculosis raged in America, which resulted in a great number of victims. Back then, there was no cure for the disease, not much was known about it, and that what was known was largely based on superstition. Therefore, vampires were often blamed for the spread of the disease and the high mortality rate. Not for the first time in history either. Already during the plague or the smallpox pandemic, the spread of it was explained as to be the effect of the undead. They are said to have been associated with the so-called plague air, which caused it. When one person passed away due to it, the others became infected and left this world. It was then that the first victim was accused of being a vampire. This was also the case of Mercy Brown. The woman lived in Exeter, Rhode Island, and was the daughter of a farmer named George Brown. The family was large, and when the disease came, many of its members would pass away. Mercy was one of the first victims. While her next of kin was suffering, the superstitious townsmen told the heads of the family that perhaps one of the members that had left the world was a vampire and was sucking the life out of their loved ones. As you can imagine, this news caused great panic. To find out whether this was the case, it was decided that they would exhume the bodies and search them for any signs of vampirism. And in doing so, a terrifying discovery was made. The body of Mercy, Mr. Brown's oldest daughter, showed no serious signs of decay, and there was still blood in her heart, which meant that she must have been a vampire who contributed to the spread of the illness in her family. The reasonable explanation from the doctors that this condition of her body was caused by her being buried during the freezing winter months, which slowed down the process, did not help. The panic was so great that it was decided to take drastic steps so that the girl would no longer threaten her loved ones or other people. It was decided to remove some of her organs and burn them. Moreover, it was thought that the ash thus obtained would be a good cure for the disease, so it was given to the living members of the family. As one can easily guess, this did not bring the expected results, as tuberculosis soon took them to the other world. Looking at the story from the perspective of today's times, it is quite obvious that Miss Mercy was far from being a vampire, and all the suspicion she had been subjected to was due solely to this prevailing superstitions. However, this unbelievable case has gained great fame, and for many, it has become a symbol of an obsession with vampirism. Mercy Brown was named as the first female vampire, and her story became an inspiration for filmmakers and writers. Moreover, her grave is still visited by many tourists to this day. And are you curious, believe that vampires existed or still exist? Do you know other incredible stories about these creatures? What movie about Dracula do you think is the best? Or are there any lovers of Twilight Saga among you? Why do you think vampires fascinate humans so much? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in the next video.